Welcome back to Diplomacy and International Relations by Bastian Freiburg. A quick reminder, this podcast is AI generated and all the information is vetted by Bastian Freiburg himself, so you can be sure you are getting accurate and insightful content.
As always.
In this second episode of our miniseries, we are diving deep into war and peace, looking at the intriguing and at times unsettling realities of the 21st century.
And these realities are constantly shifting,
Exactly.
demanding a closer look at how our understanding of war and peace has been challenged in recent years.
Let's start with a striking image. Children in Aleppo rolling burning tires down the streets to create this thick smoke screen, desperately trying to hide their city from Russian bombers. It's a far cry from the historical images we associate with war.
Yeah.
So what does this tell us about how conflict is waged today?
Well, that image from Aleppo speaks volumes about a fundamental shift in warfare, a move away from traditional interstate wars toward conflicts that are embedded within societies, often blurring the lines between combatants and civilians.
It challenges the very notion of the long peace we often hear about in the post-World War II era. On the one hand, we haven't seen a major war between global superpowers since 1945, but on the other hand, conflict seems to be simmering beneath the surface almost everywhere. How do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory ideas?
This is where the paradox lies. While the UN Charter aimed to outlaw interstate wars, it didn't foresee the rise of internal conflicts, often fueled by external actors with their own agendas. The nature of war has transformed, becoming more insidious and challenging to define.
It's almost as if we treated the symptom, but not the underlying disease.
Yeah.
And the numbers seem to back this up. A dramatic rise in interstate conflicts since 1945, reaching a peak of 50 active conflicts simultaneously.
Yes, while wars between states have decreased, those within states have become more frequent, more complex, and more devastating. The Syrian civil war, with the siege of Aleppo you mentioned earlier, is a stark example. You have local factions vying for power, interwoven with the interests of international players like Russia, Iran, the US, and Turkey. It's incredibly complex and highlights how interconnected global politics have become.
You start to see the limitations of the traditional framework of war and peace, especially when civilians are increasingly caught in the crossfire.
And it's not just a matter of being caught in the crossfire anymore. The unsettling reality is that targeting civilian populations has become a deliberate strategy in many modern conflicts.
This is where things take a disturbing turn, right? We can trace this trend back to ideologies like Hitler's Lebensraum, which aimed to eliminate entire populations to make way for a so-called superior race, or consider Stalin's brutal purges in Poland designed to crush any potential resistance. These were calculated acts of violence against civilians, not just collateral damage.
Exactly. And sadly, this way of thinking about war as a means to control and shape populations persists even today. Think about the Iraq War and the battle for Fallujah in 2004. It wasn't simply about defeating insurgents on a battlefield. It became about controlling the entire population through biometric registration, surveillance, and intense scrutiny.
This level of control and surveillance really blurs the lines, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, at what point does maintaining peace become indistinguishable from a form of war waged against the very population you claim to be protecting?
It's a very difficult question,
Yeah.
and one that challenges our traditional understanding of both war and peace. And we can't forget the lasting impact of the Cold War, which, although it didn't lead to direct conflict between superpowers, cast a long shadow of nuclear annihilation.
Even without direct conflict, the Cold War era was defined by the terrifying possibility of targeting civilian populations as a key element of deterrence. It's almost as if the entire world was held hostage by the threat of mutually assured destruction.
Absolutely, and that constant threat shaped global politics and security doctrines in profound ways, even today. It influences how we perceive risk and conflict.
So we have this backdrop of the Cold War and its lasting effects. But at the same time, we're seeing a shift towards conflicts that are becoming increasingly fragmented and decentralized. Military strategist Rupert Smith called this war amongst the people. What did he mean by that, and how does it apply to the world today?
Smith's concept is crucial to understanding modern warfare. He argued that traditional battle lines are dissolving and conflicts are becoming embedded within societies. It's not about armies clashing on open battlefields. It's about insurgents, militias, and even terrorist groups operating within civilian populations, making it incredibly difficult to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants.
That makes sense, especially when we consider the war on terror, which seems to defy the traditional definitions of war altogether.
Precisely. The war on terror, with its asymmetrical nature and focus on non-state actors like terrorist groups, exemplifies this shift. Take, for instance, Ayman Zawahiri's strategy during the Iraq War. His goal was to involve the Muslim masses in the conflict, further blurring the lines and making it incredibly difficult to achieve a clear victory.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? If the lines between war and peace are becoming increasingly blurred and traditional definitions are no longer adequate, what does that mean for the future of global security? How do we even define peace in this new world of conflict?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We might need to rethink our entire framework for understanding conflict and peace in the 21st century. The UN Charter's focus on preventing interstate war might be outdated in the face of these new realities.
It seems like we need a more nuanced and sophisticated approach to security, one that recognizes the complexities of modern conflict and the evolving relationship between war and peace.
Absolutely, and that's something we need to explore further.
Definitely. But before we delve deeper into those complexities, let's focus on this idea of war against populations. We've touched on some historical examples, but I think it's crucial to understand how this trend is manifesting in the 21st century.
I agree. And a key aspect of that is the rise of terrorism, which has become a defining feature of modern conflict and raises a whole new set of challenges.
That's where we'll pick things up in part 2 of this deep dive. Stay tuned.
As we were discussing, the very definition of war has become more complex. We tend to think of peace as the absence of major interstate wars, but what if war has morphed into something more insidious, something embedded within the fabric of society itself?
That's a really thought-provoking idea. It challenges us to consider whether the long peace we often talk about is actually just an illusion, a way of ignoring the conflicts that simmer beneath the surface.
It's a crucial point. When we look at the rise of interstate conflict, the blurring lines between combatants and civilians, and the deliberate targeting of populations, it's clear that conflict has taken on new forms.
And terrorism seems to thrive in this environment of ambiguity and blurred lines. It's a tactic that deliberately targets civilians, aiming to create fear and chaos, not just within a specific location, but across entire societies.
Terrorism exploits the interconnectedness of the modern world. An attack in one country can send shockwaves across the globe, impacting political discourse, security policies, and even daily life in countries far removed from the actual event.
The impact of 9/11 is a perfect example of this. The attacks happened in the United States, but the consequences resonated globally, leading to heightened security measures, increased surveillance, and a shift in foreign policy in many countries.
It really highlights the psychological dimension of terrorism, the way it can undermine our sense of security and stability, even if we haven't personally experienced an attack.
That psychological impact is something we often overlook when discussing conflict. The fear of terrorism, even in countries that haven't been directly attacked, has led to significant changes in domestic and foreign policy. Think about the rise of surveillance technologies, the tightening of borders, and the debates about security versus civil liberties.
Exactly. The war on terror has in many ways become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The fear it generates leads to policies that, while intended to increase security, can sometimes erode the very freedoms they aim to protect.
So it seems we're caught in a kind of paradox fighting terrorism by implementing measures that in some cases mirror the tactics of the terrorists themselves. Surveillance control limitations on freedoms is a very difficult balance to strike.
It certainly is, and it underscores the need for a more nuanced and comprehensive approach to security in the 21st century. We can't simply rely on the old paradigms of interstate war and traditional military solutions.
So are you suggesting we need a fundamental shift in our thinking about security, moving away from a purely state-centric view?
I believe we do. We need to broaden our understanding of security to encompass not just military strength and the protection of borders, but also factors like economic development, social justice, and environmental sustainability.
That's a very different way of thinking about security than we're used to.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like you're advocating for a more human-centered approach. Is that what you mean?
It's certainly part of it. The concept of human security has gained traction in recent years. It emphasizes the well-being of individuals and communities, recognizing that true security is about creating conditions where people can live with dignity, free from fear and want.
This idea of human security seems particularly relevant in the context of war amongst the people. If traditional battle lines are dissolving and conflict is becoming increasingly embedded within societies, then ensuring the security of individuals within those societies becomes paramount.
Absolutely. It's no longer enough to simply focus on defeating an enemy army or securing a particular territory. We need to address the root causes of conflict, which often lie in social and economic inequalities, political instability, and a lack of opportunities for large segments of the population.
It seems like a monumental task, especially when we consider the complexity of the global landscape and the interconnectedness of these challenges.
It's certainly not easy, and the institutions and frameworks we developed after World War II are struggling to adapt to this new reality. The UN Charter, for example, was designed to prevent interstate wars, but it's ill-equipped to deal with the intricacies of modern conflicts involving non-state actors, diffuse networks, and a blurring of combatant and civilian roles.
So where do we go from here? If our current systems and definitions are no longer adequate, what does a more effective approach to security look like in this new world of conflict?
That's the challenge, isn't it? We need to start by acknowledging that the world has changed, and our approaches to security need to change with it. We need to move beyond outdated definitions of war and peace and develop new strategies that address the root causes of conflict while recognizing the interconnected nature of global security threats.
That's a tall order, but it seems like an essential one if we want to navigate the complexities of the 21st century.
I couldn't agree more. We need to move beyond a narrow state-centric view of security and embrace a more inclusive and human-centered approach. It's about recognizing that true peace is more than just the absence of war. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
It's a powerful vision, but one that requires a fundamental shift in thinking and a willingness to adapt to the evolving nature of conflict. Makes you wonder if we're truly equipped to deal with these emerging challenges.
It's a valid question. While the task might seem daunting, I believe there are reasons to be optimistic. We're seeing a growing awareness of the need for a more holistic approach to security, and there's increasing focus on strategies that emphasize diplomacy development and addressing the root causes of conflict.
Those are certainly positive developments,
Yeah.
but the landscape of conflict itself seems to be changing just as rapidly, particularly with the advancement of technology. How do we factor that into the equation?
That's an excellent point. The rapid advancement of technology, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence, drones, and cyber warfare, is reshaping the battlefield and raising a whole new set of ethical and strategic challenges.
It's a topic that deserves its own deep dive. So for now, let's shift our focus to the impact of these emerging technologies on the evolving nature of conflict and security. Feels like we've stepped into a science fiction movie. You know, when we talk about the impact of technology on warfare, drones, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, these aren't just futuristic concepts anymore. They're shaping the realities of conflict in the 21st century.
It's remarkable how quickly technology is transforming the battlefield.
Yeah.
Take drones, for example. They've become commonplace in modern warfare, used for surveillance, targeted strikes, and even logistics.
It's fascinating, but also a little unnerving to think that we're increasingly relying on machines to fight our wars. What does this mean for the future of conflict? Are we heading towards a world where wars are fought by robots, with humans safely removed from the battlefield?
That's a question many are grappling with. While there are potential benefits to using technology in warfare, like increased precision, reduced risk to soldiers, the ability to reach inaccessible areas, there are also serious ethical and strategic concerns.
I can see how drone warfare in particular raises some difficult questions. You're essentially talking about remote-controlled killing, which can create a disconnect between the act of warfare and its consequences.
That disconnect is a major concern. It can make warfare seem almost abstract, sanitized, when in reality the consequences are all too real. Drone strikes can result in civilian casualties just like any other form of warfare.
And the lack of transparency surrounding drone warfare adds another layer of complexity. It's difficult to hold individuals or nations accountable when the decision-making processes and the rules of engagement are shrouded in secrecy.
Transparency and accountability are crucial, especially when we're dealing with technologies that can have such a profound impact on human life.
And then there's cyber warfare, which takes the battlefield into the digital realm. It's almost like a shadow war fought in the invisible spaces of the internet, but with the potential to cause real-world chaos.
Think about it. A well-coordinated cyber attack can cripple critical infrastructure, disrupt financial systems, steal sensitive data, and even influence elections. It's a form of warfare that doesn't require boots on the ground, but can have devastating consequences for individuals, societies, and entire nations.
It's a sobering thought. And it seems like cyber warfare is particularly difficult to defend against, given the interconnectedness of our digital world and the constant evolution of technology.
That's right. Cyber warfare is constantly evolving, making it challenging to develop effective defenses. And the attribution problem is a major hurdle. It's often difficult to pinpoint the source of a cyber attack, which makes it hard to deter aggression or respond proportionally.
So we've got these incredibly powerful technologies that are reshaping warfare in profound ways, but we're still struggling to grapple with the ethical and strategic implications. It feels like we're entering uncharted territory.
We are in many ways. And then we have artificial intelligence, which has the potential to revolutionize warfare in ways we can only begin to imagine.
AI seems like the wild card in all of this. On the one hand, it could lead to advancements that make warfare more precise, minimizing civilian casualties and reducing the overall cost of conflict. But on the other hand, it raises the specter of autonomous weapons systems, machines that can make life or death decisions without human intervention.
That's the ethical dilemma we're facing. The development of autonomous weapons systems raises fundamental questions about human control, accountability, and the potential for unintended consequences.
It's almost like we're stepping into a science fiction dystopia. What happens when machines are making decisions about who lives and who dies? It's a chilling thought.
It's a thought that keeps many experts up at night. The potential benefits of AI in warfare are undeniable, but we need to proceed with caution, ensuring that human controls and ethical considerations are at the forefront of any development or deployment of these technologies.
So where do we go from here? How do we navigate this complex and rapidly evolving landscape? It feels like we're at a crossroads, grappling with technologies that have the potential to both enhance and undermine our security.
I think it starts with awareness.
Yeah.
We need to understand the implications of these technologies, the ethical challenges they pose, and the potential risks they create. We need to engage in open and honest debates about the future of warfare and the role technology should play.
It sounds like we need to develop a new kind of literacy for the 21st century, a literacy of technology, conflict, and the evolving nature of security.
I love that idea. We need to educate ourselves, engage in critical thinking about these issues, and advocate for policies that prioritize human security and responsible innovation.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the changing nature of war and peace in the 21st century. We've covered a lot of ground, from the blurring lines between combatants and civilians to the rise of terrorism and the impact of emerging technologies.
It's clear that we're facing unprecedented challenges, but also new opportunities to reshape our understanding of conflict and security.
As we move forward, it's crucial to remember that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. The choices we make today will shape the future of warfare and determine whether these technologies ultimately enhance or undermine our security and humanity.
We all have a role to play in shaping that future. By staying informed, engaging in critical dialogue, and advocating for ethical and responsible approaches to technology and conflict, we can help ensure that the 21st century is defined by peace, not by the ever-evolving horrors of war.
That's a powerful message to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into war and peace in the 21st century. We hope you'll continue to explore these complex and vital issues with us. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking the tough questions.